They're trying to create an alternative market to the US dollar for the pricing and settlement of oil. They're trying to kill the petrodollar. Trump will not allow BRICS to release a coin. He will punish countries that try and do it. The best bet for BRICS is to just go all in on Bitcoin.
Hey everybody, this episode of Supply Shock is powered by Core. You're going to hear a lot more about them later in this episode, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Core is the Bitcoin consumer chain. Stake your Bitcoin, explore Bitcoin DeFi, and earn rewards today. Visit stake.coredao.org/blockworks. You'll hear more about them later in the episode.
Crypto's premier institutional conference is coming to New York City, March 18th to the 20th. That's right, I'm talking about Digital Asset Summit, presented by Blockworks. Of course, I'll be there bringing a Bitcoin maximalist perspective to a number of talks and panels, where I'll be discussing why Bitcoin might be headed to $1 million. And, well, the rest of the digital asset market just might be trending to zero. Get your tickets online today. They're selling fast. Putin is opening Russia to Bitcoin. 12 politicians endorsing a plan to buy over 1 million Bitcoin in America, and $200 Bitcoin miners finding $250,000 blocks. I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, the Bitcoin historian. This is another episode of a special news roundup on Supply Shock with special guests Michael McSweeney, managing editor of Blockworks, and Nolan Bowerly of Roxham TV. The price of Bitcoin, $80,000 across exchanges. Want to dive into the news. So yesterday, obviously, a big day in Washington, D.C., where politicians converged and backed the Bitcoin bill. So an effort for America, the American Congress, to authorize spending to back the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Nolan, would love to get your thoughts on this newly introduced legislation. Is America going to buy Bitcoin?
Yeah, it looks like it. And you heard people talk about the Bit Bond, which I've been talking about on this show for a while. They are related. The Bit Bond is one of the talks that was on the agenda yesterday for the Bitcoin, the America, what is it? The Bitcoin America?
I think it was Bitcoin for America.
Bitcoin for America. Yeah, great lineup. And indeed, seeing the Cynthia Lummis bill again, seeing folks get involved, it's sort of in line with what we heard last Friday with the White House event, with the budget neutral approach to America accumulating and stacking more sats. What stuck out to me, though, was the Michael Saylor talk, the 30-minute Michael Saylor talk, getting into manifest destiny.
Was that a new talk? Was that actually a new talk? I'm having a hard time with his slides these days, telling where there's new material coming.
It looked like new material to me. And I hadn't seen him absorb that manifest destiny talking point into it and really underlying that this is all about, it's a financial war. And even just talking about how the things that were normal in the 20th century are not the same as what's going on in the 21st century. I thought his Metcalfe law, he did one thing where this is meant on a Metcalfe network. This is a Newtonian network. You know, of course, for viewers who don't know, Metcalfe's law has been the primary metric for most valuation of Silicon Valley companies. It's just a square of users. It was used before they had revenue to really figure out how much Google and all these guys would be worth. It's something that applied to telephone companies and made sense because you need 2 users for it to work, and the more people that come, the more it works. But him getting into this whole Newtonian physics network, we've heard that before, but bringing that Newtonian physics, this whole battle lines of World War III are economic, and talking about how the institutions that once worked in the previous century will not work again. And then America has one hope here, and that's to get rich and stay rich. And Bitcoin is the way to do it. And to underline the manifest destiny part of that, I thought was interesting because, you know, we've heard about Greenland. Greenland had a vote yesterday, right? Greenland choosing Trump, it looks like, over in Greenland.
Wait, is that an actual referendum on the ballot? Are they voting for them?
No, what they did is they voted to elect a new government, and if I understand it, they voted for the party that is like pretty anti-Trump, but they only make up like 30% of the parliament there, so it's a little.
Hold on. Yeah, not exactly. It wasn't exactly that.
Okay.
What happened was
the Nolan big thesis conflicting with McSweeney's like granular
reading in the news.
No.
I'd love a correction if based on the report.
So what it looks like is the former ruling party so everyone running was for independence of some sort from Denmark, right? So all the parties are at a different time scale of independence from Denmark. And the former party in charge, more left-wing, let's say, they're gone. They came in third. Second place at 24%. The winning party got 29.9, let's say 30. Second place was the MAGA right-wing party. First place was what you're saying. I don't know about anti-MAGA. They're center-right. They're slow independence is what they call it. They're the slow independence party. But they have to form government in a coalition with the MAGA second place party. So we're going to see some degree of what does slow independence mean? It means that maybe they're independent, but not from America. So
I mean, this is the most information I'm ever consumed about the Greenland government. So one, it sounds like they're independent. They might merge with the United States. Maybe there's a path.
Well, they elected candidates who want to declare independence, and I appreciate your clarification because that fills in my info gap a bit more. So they elected the parties that won the most seats in their legislature. They want to secede from Denmark, but it seems like the differences between them are the pace by which they would secede, and then also the kind of relationship that they want. And I think that the second place party, if I recall correctly, they want like a tighter like security pact with the US, which, if we go back to history, that usually is the first step toward annexation. Whereas I wonder if the party that did prevail the most, they would maybe want to slow walk anything.
They want to negotiate. They're more of a let me see what your offer is, better terms.
I'm waiting for Nolan to tie this back into Bitcoin.
Well, it's very easy because that's what we heard from Michael Saylor about Manifest Destiny. What is Manifest Destiny? He said Bitcoin is America's Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny, for people who don't know, actually means American control over the continent. It means that America moves and occupies, not from Washington, D.C. Let's not call this a Washington, D.C. project, right? In the normal American Constitution, in the real American Constitution, the individual states are full-on sovereign entities, and that they only overlap a little bit in a limited way. We've come to this understanding of America only in recent terms with these institutions that the states are sort of the B team, the junior, and that the federal government is varsity. That's not the case. For America to grow, that formula has to change. And Bitcoin is a part of that change, I think. And what you heard from Michael Saylor in that speech, tying Manifest Destiny and America's growth potential in the future, that's what we're talking about, because America is destroying the institutions that it used to dominate the 20th century, and it has to create new ones. It can't just leave everything because other people will occupy the void. You've got China, you've got other countries that would happily occupy the void that America's leaving. So how do you fill the air? You do it with continued economic strength. And continued economic strength in this case can't be built off the dollar. It looks like bimetallism if under a different name or whatever, but this looks like political money is here to stay in America. The US dollar will be exactly what they asked for, political money, but something else has to emerge. And that's why the Bitbond combined with the strategic Bitcoin reserve is really the spearhead of what this could look like.
Well, Jack Mallers is obviously coming in and maybe giving a lens that I appreciated more, talking about how Bitcoin aligns with American values, but maybe without this expansionism. McSweeney, let's go to the granular details. Obviously, 7 representatives in the House. Green kind of introduced the Bitcoin Act in the House of Representatives. 5 new co-sponsors joining Cynthia Lummis in the Senate. Still all a Republican support. Can the Bitcoin bill survive the current environment, just being a Republican proposal? What is your thoughts on the signatories that we saw yesterday?
Well, I think it's going to be a very interesting few months. I think what we saw in the last year is that there is a recognition. I mean, there has always been a bipartisan level of support for Bitcoin and crypto in Washington. That's always been true. I think that the Republicans, perhaps wisely, have been louder in their support. I'm talking about mainly Congress. I think the Biden administration, they played their chips where they were, and what happened. But I think that strain of bipartisan support has always been there in Congress, and I suspect that. I mean, it really depends on the conditions by which this legislation moves forward. The way that it has worked, I'd say, over the past decade is you have like a series of massive pieces of legislation, which in the end just sort of like hoover up all of these different bits of smaller legislation. So if I had to bet my bit cent, I would say that this legislation could succeed were Congress to move in that direction. What we're seeing right now is Congress is trying to pass a big old piece of legislation just to keep the lights on through the end of September. And then they're going to move into what is called the reconciliation process, which is there are certain constraints to how you can approve funding or like raise taxes or lower taxes. But Republicans wouldn't need Democrats to do any of this. Is it possible that this Bitcoin legislation winds its way in there? I'm not the House or Senate parliamentarian, but it is certainly possible that it could wind up in there. I know that there is a strain of republicanism that says we need to move away from these massive bills and actually go through a consistent appropriations process and also pass legislation as it comes. Personally, I think that's a great idea. Will Washington do that? Probably not. So again, I think that as these different pieces of these mega bills come together, I wouldn't be too surprised if they attract bipartisan support. Now, I don't think there's been a real wide debate amongst like all of the parties together over whether like the pros or cons of this legislation. But I wonder if in this new environment, if it would succeed. It wouldn't surprise me, but I think we have to wait and see.
Well, the market's certainly enthusiastic for it. There was a bit of a recovery in optimism yesterday after, a bleak weekend after the White House summit. A lot of people think that Trump under-delivered, certainly hedging, going back to his quote when, asked to say the line, Bitcoiners say never sell your Bitcoin. He said, is it true? Who the hell knows? Let's turn over to the White House summit on Friday. I mean, it seems like years away now, but only a few days removed. We saw kind of the industry come to the White House, being welcomed by Trump. What did we learn from this summit? Obviously, there was, no big news other than the reveal of the Bitcoin reserve, which was telegraphed in advance. But Nolan, what were your thoughts?
My favorite part was watching Trump set up FIFA coin and it's
so good.
Drop onto everyone in the industry.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. And I saw it coming because, we covered it on Roxham TV. I know you guys covered it on your account, Rizzo. You know how the feeds were working. We ended up getting the feed from the actual Oval Office first before he moved over to the crypto gathering. So it starts with him there and he reveals the FIFA trophy. And the minute I saw the FIFA trophy, I said, you know what that reminds me of? One of those things that Michael Saylor buys, one of those huge, elaborate block clocks. And so when he brings it in, I'm like, that's the FIFA trophy. They still had it back under the reveal. And then, of course, Michael Saylor starts taking pictures. And I'm like, oh, he likes the design. But then little did he know he was about to get a coin dropped on his ass from the FIFA guy. I've never seen this. Like, people, we can talk all we want about technique, about ICOs or initial coin, how airdrops, how this all works. There's never been one done with this level of skill in our lives. We just saw the Mona Lisa of coin drops. There's never been anything like it. And
sorry, do you think this was an unofficial reveal of a FIFA coin? Is that what?
Oh yeah, that's what happened. He revealed a FIFA coin on them, and the FIFA guy he said it straight up. He goes,
you don't think it was a passing joke? They were just.
I think it might have been, but who for sure? But it all came together to look like it was coordinated. I don't think they definitely said we're going to drop a FIFA coin on this guy. But just watching Trump out of nowhere bring the FIFA guy into the room, what the hell was he doing there?
I mean, it is a good question. I mean, I assumed that I was seeing random content, but you're suggesting there was a mind to the madness here, and I was actually being subverted with advertising for a token that will.
I mean, come on. He sold a car from the White House lawn yesterday. This is a salesman. He brought the Teslas onto the White House lawn yesterday very deliberately. Everything's computer. Right?
I mean, is this sort of the everything as part of Trump's grand plan theory? Because I feel like this
is a grand plan. Who knows if it's a grand plan? It was just funny. It was just funny to see all of these guys, a big moment in their life. They're loving their lives. They're all having a great day. We're the luminary. We're the high IQ people. Trump told them all they were high IQ, but
they all had to clap at a trophy for
FIFA coin got slapped down their throats.
Yeah, it was quite ridiculous.
So, when FIFA coin strategic reserve?
Everything's computer. Everything's computer.
HODLing isn't enough anymore. Bitcoin is evolving on Core, unlocking yield, utility, and a thriving DeFi ecosystem. With over 250 dApps and nearly $1 billion in total value locked, Bitcoin DeFi is growing fast. Hundreds of thousands of users are already staking, lending, and building on Core's high-speed, low-fee rails. Now it's your turn. Whether you're a user or a builder, The Core Ignition program rewards you for participating in Bitcoin's next evolution. Unlock your Bitcoin and use Core. Start earning with Ignition today at ignition.coredao.org/blockworks. For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com. Unlock the power of your Bitcoin with Ledn. For over 6 years, Ledn has helped thousands HODL their Bitcoin while accessing liquidity, focusing on transparency, security, and trust. Learn what your Bitcoin can do for you and see why so many clients trust Ledn. Visit ledn.io to learn more.
Let's go into the actual, orders talking about, ending Operation Choke Point 2.0. But I also think David Sachs selling this to the American public, right? There was sort of formal messaging. And one of the most interesting ones I thought was, it's the Bitcoin has gone up. This is the United States leaving assets to the American people. But he said, I think Biden left you with debts. Here, I'm leaving you with assets. The Bitcoin Strategic Reserve being proposed as this sort of national asset. What do we think of the maybe more polished messaging, if not from Trump, from the David Sachs kind of wing of the kind of crypto czar status?
Personally, I think it's brilliant because Trump has a coalition here that's tough. We talked about it in last week's episode, this blue collar aspect that's inside. It's kind of what I predicted, that Bitcoin would be segregated, because I said it was a bit like the Greenland, Canada thing. Greenland sounds stupid. You put it next to Canada, suddenly your brain says, in comparison, it's not so crazy. Trump does have a lot of convincing to do with Bitcoin, because you can't make it seem like Trump favors this one constituency in the same way that maybe Wall Street was privileged and favored politically during both Republican and Democrat administrations before. It can't be a credit default bailout type of thing, right? Trump does have to be very careful that the tech bros and the blue collar people get along. And he can't go out there and just tell them what to think. They'll reject it, right? He knows how to persuade people. So what I saw was exactly that story. I saw the ability to maintain the coalition, right? Because it's all net neutral policies. Bitcoin was indeed segregated. The other coins in the stockpile aren't the same. Those can be sold, right? As I understand, it's not the same formula. So I think it was a masterclass in how to keep a coalition together. And there's nothing that anyone could object to outright. The blue collar folks, their minds are now, I think, more open. We saw the Bitaxe thing happen, right? We're going to talk about that later. But it looks like the ability for everyone to think in Bitcoin terms is going to be presented to people. I think David Sachs did a great job expressing that. I like the way he shared it publicly. I like the tweet he made. I think he won over a lot of people who don't give a shit about crypto, but that are 100% diehard MAGA.
Well, I will say one thing, and maybe this leads us to our next subject, but I was following the international news over the weekend, and I will say the silence over the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve has been particularly deafening. I don't think a single world leader has commented on it yet. I did see some sparse reporting from China, which obviously in and of itself is a big deal, that there's even, a breach of this, kind of silent treatment that they're giving Bitcoin. But really, we haven't seen a single world leader respond to what happened. What do we make of that? Just the fact that no one has really acted, though I know, we'll get into the Russia stuff if that's a direct response. But what do we think about the silence around the Bitcoin strategic role?
I wonder if that's just a result of questions about if this is a gimmick, right? I think once the stockpile, once the reserve feels more real than maybe it does now, perhaps there will be more of a response. My takeaway from that summit was it was a cementing of the relationship between this White House and the crypto industry. I think if you sort of strip all the pageantry away,
that's a good way of putting it.
The executive orders could have been signed anytime, but the fact that these people were in the room together, and yeah, so that relationship has been cemented. Where it goes from here will be very interesting to watch. But I think that's really the major outcome there. I suspect maybe there are political considerations in play there. There are some very critical midterms coming up in a year and a half. The crypto industry support during that will be very interesting to watch and to see how the industry deploys money in those races. I suspect that their money will probably lean more toward the Republican side, but I suspect that you would also see, money going toward Democrats who are more explicitly pro crypto. How candidates present and posture themselves in order to benefit from that may also be an interesting thing to watch. But yeah, it was really all about relationship building and messaging that relationship beyond the walls of the White House. I think by far was the most consequential part of that. Again, everything is all rosy cheeked, hunky dory at the start. We'll see how that relationship evolves. But I think that many, if not all, of the pledges that Trump made to the industry were delivered. So I have a hard time imagining that things would go sour. But again, time will tell.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. This was a domestic effort to shore up that side of the coalition and to make sure the blue collar MAGA folks don't feel like there's any special treatment and there's a place for them within this coalition. Now, but I will answer the question about the foreign thing, because you do have.
I do appreciate Trump's use of the word foreigners, right? Like, or no, is it Michael Saylor that uses the word foreigners? Yeah, that's interesting.
No comment on that.
Coming back. It's coming back. It's bringing it back.
I'm going to leave that one on the table.
It just sort of reminds me of remember Peter Thiel on Joe Rogan? I don't know if you guys are aware of this comment, but when Peter Thiel was on Joe Rogan, whatever it was, maybe last summer, and they talked about Bitcoin, his comment about Bitcoin was, it's kind of one of those things that's just too big to comprehend. Bitcoin is too big of a subject. And indeed, like you're saying, the brain of a lot of foreign leaders sort of has to go into this holding room of like, this is just a gimmick thing, because if it really means that America is starting to replace gold with Bitcoin, for example, the types of shifts that this means for them in their own country is too much to look at. It's too much for the human brain. It's like what we saw with the banking crisis in 2023 in America. The problem is kind of too massive to just look at it. It's almost like the debt is today. The problem is too big for the human brain to compute. So I think that's what you're seeing with the foreign leaders. I agree. You'd think they would say something, but what are they supposed to say? All my ideas are stupid, and I'm gonna I can't run my country anymore.
Well, fascinating closed doors conversations. We did get a word about the Russian central bank today, so we'll kind of go over the highlights there. So Russia, obviously, long kind of favoring, regulation that really keeps, capital domestically. But today's central bank proposing to allow buying and selling of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies under limited conditions to qualified individual investors, certain financial organizations, as long as they establish some relationship with the Bank of Russia. Bank of Russia clarifying they don't consider crypto a means of payment. Talking about this special legal regime that will be introduced for a few years. But I've always found the Russian news interesting. I mean, obviously, we've been following it for 10 years, McSweeney and myself. There's been this push and pull in Russia between the State Duma trying to kind of push forward regulation, and then Putin sort of, being maybe ambivalent to that. But we have seen Russia sort of run hot and cold on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Putin, of course, the first world leader to ever, mention Bitcoin, all the way back. I think it was in 15 and 16.
We wrote a letter to him together, if you remember, guys, because we nominated him for the most influential that year.
Right? Yeah, we invited him to come on to.
I think all three of us were working on that document. We invited him to. Invited him.
Yeah. Missed opportunity for a consensus.
Speaker. Yeah, he was alive in America back then.
Well, Russia, they were also the first, one of the first to really dig into the CBDC question, blockchain-backed securities. That central bank, I'm blanking on the name of the governor, but she's been around for quite a long time. But yeah, there's always been a very interesting curiosity there. And I think this news is a reflection of that evolving relationship. If I understand the news right, it's sort of similar to like an accredited investor in the US being allowed to invest in crypto. So again, I don't think this is like the doors are open, come on in and buy your crypto.
But you
But
got to imagine that there's investor demand, right? You got to imagine that this might be in response to grassroots,
oh
people
yeah,
just petitioning the government. They're saying, "Look, foreign entities are getting serious about this. We need to put our capital in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Otherwise, there isn't really a need for Putin to bend on this issue if indeed the issue is escalating to him." Nolan, your take?
If you look at where a lot of the types that would qualify for this have found themselves in the past couple of years, they're all in Dubai. Dubai is making a serious play against the United States. When we heard Michael Saylor's talk yesterday, the Manifest Destiny, it's about because Bitcoin doesn't have a natural home. At Roxham, that's sort of our philosophy why we built a Bitcoin denominated exchange, is that the best exchange in the world will follow the best money. So whatever jurisdiction attracts the most Bitcoin is going to do well. You have to have a sort of legal regime around that in order to attract the Bitcoin. That's why, the Dutch market was the best and biggest when the Dutch money was the best and biggest, and the English one. So you look at El Salvador, you look at UAE, these are places that are making a real play for Bitcoin to have a legal home because it doesn't have a natural one. It's on the internet. And that's kind of what I heard Michael Saylor actually talking about, is that Bitcoin has to find a home in America to get that capital allocation so that people bring their money and deposit it in Bitcoin, in America, in Bitcoin American institutions, Bitcoin American companies. So when I see Russia doing this, they get that this is now an arms race because they see it acutely in Abu Dhabi and Dubai.
The only thing better than stacking sats is staking them. With Core's self-custodial Bitcoin staking, you can earn yield on your BTC without ever giving up custody, no new trust assumptions, no counterparties, and no slashing risk. Still your keys, still your coins, now your yield. Here's how it works. Lock your Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network. Help elect a Core validator and start earning Core rewards, passively, securely, and without risk to your principal. And with dual staking, you can boost rewards by staking Core tokens alongside your Bitcoin. Institutions can also tap into Bitcoin at scale with top custodians. Don't let your Bitcoin sit idle, put it to work. Visit stake.core.dao/blockworks to start staking today. For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com. If you've been around Bitcoin for long enough, you've heard the term HODL and the name Ledn. Ledn has been the go-to specialist in Bitcoin lending for over 6 years. Ledn helps you unlock the liquidity of your BTC, allowing you to HODL while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. Ledn has been battle-tested with a focus on transparency, security, and trust. This has allowed them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn for yourself why so many clients trust Ledn by checking out Ledn's Trustpilot or their reviews on social media. And to learn more about what your Bitcoin can do for you, check out ledn.io.
I'm curious, you probably know more about the BRICS alliance than I do. I'm speaking about the kind of coalition between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and kind of some of the, exterior
South
to
Africa.
the United States financial system type entities. I guess maybe let's put our hat on here. If you are Vladimir Putin and you want to beat Trump on Bitcoin, how do you do that while maintaining this alliance that wants to move away from the dollar and maybe isn't aligned with Bitcoin? So I guess how does that how could that evolve?
To me, that play is simple. Trump will not allow BRICS to release a coin. He will punish countries that try and do it because any other nation trying to become the venue and market for gold will be a problem. So the BRICS is best bet. No one is going to trust a BRICS shitcoin. It's just not. It's not going to fly, right? It doesn't matter if it's got commodities. If it's released from basket case Brazil, financial basket case Brazil, and these
I
prices.
I honestly don't know what backs that argument.
It's not like a central bank the rest of the world is going to have much confidence.
Well,
Nor
they tried to have their own coin and it didn't go super well.
Yeah. They actually invented new money a couple of years ago because of hyperinflation, and it's sort of one of the better cases of it in the world, but it fizzled out after no time. Once the mental construct fell apart, it went the way of all the other fiat coins. But it's the same as China. China needs to use capital controls. Russia uses capital controls. So you can't have a capital control based currency being the actual venue for the pricing and settlement of oil and energy around the world. So, and that's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to create an alternative market to the US dollar for the pricing and settlement of oil. They're trying to kill the petrodollar. Now, the petrodollar is dead as it is. It couldn't be enforced any longer. The aircraft carriers don't function in the Red Sea. The Houthis kicked the American Navy's ass with those little drones. We've realized in America that projecting the petrodollar and the resources required to do that don't function anymore. Now, whatever happens, Trump today threatened Russia with terrible economic sanctions if they keep it up. And so you got to imagine that that's his one lever left, is to go after them economically. So, and I do believe that would happen if they went so far as to say, we're going to create this coin and settlement system for oil. Going on the Shanghai market is one thing. That's fine. There's enough consumption over there, but it's like a dam breaking. There's one crack in it now. The best bet for BRICS is to just go all in on Bitcoin as the both measuring stick, the metric, the denomination for oil measured in Bitcoin, and then the settlement layer. Because then you're not allowing any country to take over the oil market. And America could live with that. America has enough domestic consumption and production that we can keep the West Texas price a relative benchmark for ourselves. It's already just a benchmark for ourselves. OPEC undercuts it with their stuff. The British price is also bullshit. The Canadian price is also way less than Texas because they can't get the product to market. But the West Texas is a really good price. It makes sense for our own consumption. We can actually understand at the pump based on the West Texas price. And so it's a really important index, and it'll work for us for a long time going forward. But will it work for the rest of the world? The OPEC price is already different. What's going to happen over there? I think you're going to have to go to an international rate that everyone can agree on as money becomes more and more, in this bimetallic system, as fiat becomes more and more politically entrenched, more and more about patronage and more about the privileges of citizenship, social security, all that other stuff. You're going to need a neutral money, and that's where Bitcoin comes in.
Do you think there's an outcome where, if whether deliberate or not, the actions of the Trump administration bring the value of the dollar down, that might threaten the status of the dollar within the petrodollar system? I mean, I think that if let's say hypothetically, if BRICS were to go after the big kahuna in the room, which is the dollar, then they would have to peel away Saudi Arabia. And if you can get Saudi Arabia to agree, we would also trade, say, like the yuan or like some kind of BRICS currency.
They already agreed to that.
Yeah.
They already agreed to that. Now, they already did that. They already pulled themselves out of the petrodollar guarantees of buying, and they already did shipments for yuan. So that already happened under Biden. That's the problem here. The cat is out of the bag.
But I guess, how do you get this whole coalition on Bitcoin? And I guess the subject of BRICS going Bitcoin, maybe what can Putin do? Obviously, we know Russia has energy, right? We saw Belarus last week come out and say they're going to mine with stranded energy. We know in Siberia and kind of these other northern parts of Russia, there's tremendous demand for excess heat. Some people up there, mining kind of in their homes in order to kind of make money and, profit, from the Bitcoin network. Obviously, I don't think it's in Putin's incentive to just tell us he's doing something with Bitcoin. How would we maybe know, or what could he do? Obviously, he could maybe pursue civil forfeitures. Let's say Putin wanted to create a strategic Russian Bitcoin reserve. What would he do, Nolan McSweeney?
I think it's exactly like America. I think he would just come out and declare it. I mean, according to a lot of people, Putin is the richest man in the world, right? I don't know if that's true, but there are people who say that's the case, right? There was a guy who's dead now, Boris Nemtsov, who was the former prime minister of Russia, who did the Pussy Riot protests in 2012, if you guys remember when that was big in Russia. He knows Putin really well, and that was part of his roadshow. He'd go around the world with this whole show and tell thing about how Putin is the richest man on earth, and that's where a lot of his stuff is coming from, and Russia is the reason why. So if you see Putin realizing that his own wealth is threatened and moving towards Bitcoin, because you got to kind of think of the state money as his money. There's a blending there that we can't ever understand. We'll never have full visibility on what goes on over in Russia. It's just sort of a mystery when it comes to
It's kind of like the wealth of the Roman emperor is the wealth of the empire,
Yeah.
kind of relationship,
Yeah.
right? Where their wealth is so massive, it kind of and again, I don't know if that's true, but
Me either. Like exactly. Like I sort of believe it, right?
Sort of like Putin is the cash economy.
Well, I think the narrative here is like
Yeah.
states are trying to retain control while also seeming to also have to acknowledge that they're relinquishing control. Is Trump maybe further along in understanding that with Bitcoin than maybe a Putin or a Xi?
Well, I would honestly be shocked if there came a moment where Trump said, "Hey, Bitcoin is number one here in America." I think that would have aftershocks that would perhaps undermine the project that I think, some of the stuff that Nolan has talked about, where to sort of move the U.S. toward a money system that is more robust than, say, the dollar, which has been whittled away for the past century. I think it's going to be a lot of management, like expectation management over there, which I think would be the wise course of action if they were to go down that road. But going back to Russia, I guess, one of the big unknowns here is how much of this is the political forces that are in orbit around Putin versus like Putin saying, you need to do this. Like just based on the news sources out there, I don't think there's an indication of that.
Yeah, it's pretty limited right now. There's only a single source that came out through Bloomberg, but obviously, I think this is the first sign we've seen from the international community that there might be a response, and the fact that it is Russia, I think, certainly intriguing because again, there's this whole backdrop of already there's a war of the financial systems. There's a war with BRICS trying to move out of the U.S. dollar system. You've now got Trump backing stable coins. You've got Trump backing Bitcoin. There might be conversations going on at the high level between the BRICS nations. I mean, certainly there's been nothing reported, but I mean, you would certainly imagine that if something was going to start those conversations, it would be the United States, having a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
I just think there's a tendency to let's say we're here in the US and we look at Russia. I think there is a tendency, especially in the West, to look at, say, Russia or China as like a monolith that does a thing as a monolith. And whereas I think the truth, and I think we've seen this here back home with some of these regulatory agencies that crypto people don't like, they're really not monolithic. They're comprised of hundreds or thousands of people with different viewpoints, and those interlocking viewpoints shape policy. And so if I had to guess, I would say what's happening in Russia is there are political forces, maybe Putin involved, maybe not so much, that have an incentive to push a policy like this because maybe they already own crypto and they would like the law to reflect the behavior that's already happening in the gray market. And this would essentially legitimize, like reading the news, I think that's what's happening here. This is legitimizing what's already happening. And the fact that it's focusing on accredited investors likely means that this wealthier, probably more politically connected class is achieving a regulatory outcome that they would like.
And of course, Russia legislative system, as we've known from the years of covering, there probably would be some financing that would come through those state Duma.
Yeah,
we might see bills progress if there was something on it, like a strategic reserve where, we've seen several efforts within Russia over the years to ban Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies that have advanced through various levels of the legislature and failed. So certainly by no means top down. Final thoughts there, Nolan?
Yeah, I just want to add to what Michael said about the monolith piece, because it's also our own projection as Americans. Like Americans do have this thing where they're patriotic about their money. These other countries are not like that. That's like an American thing to be like, the dollar, it's got to be supreme. These people have had the rug pulled.
It's like a good design, all things considered.
It is. And it worked for a great time. I mean, maybe one day, but if you go to China, they know their government rug pulls them. It is a
lot of cash. I know Nolan.
Well, they manipulate their currency. This is known, right? They are currency manipulators. They know that overnight they're going to take a haircut because their government. That's why they have capital controls. Russia has severe and strict capital controls for that reason, just so they can cut the hair of their citizens. So in many ways, the citizens already don't have this rooting home team thing for their money. They're as patriotic as Americans are, but it's like for barbecue and food. You know what I mean? Like it's a
Can't take
Yeah,
that
it's
from
great.
them. Yeah.
It's a uniquely American thing. It's because America did have this money over time that did make it that way. And again, I'll go to the institutions in my final thought of it about what's actually going on here. Because go back to the White House thing. You know, one of the most important things about the White House summit that a lot of people aren't talking about, but it's who wasn't there, who wasn't invited, right? Who wasn't invited is the Federal Reserve, any of the other federal oversight bodies, the FDIC. None of these people were welcomed. And so you created a Bitcoin strategic reserve and put it in the hands of the Treasury. I've been talking about this battle between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve and who's actually going to be the economic engine of the United States going forward. Trump made a clear indication that Bitcoin belongs to the Treasury, that it's part of the Treasury setting interest rates going forward. This is what the big story is in America right now. Who is going to be able to set those rates? We saw Jerome Powell trying to make a comment last week. Oh, it's tariffs are now, inflation is from the tariffs. Oh, it's the tariffs, which is a scam, right? It's a complete scam. Everyone knows why we have inflation in America. The government spent too much money. It's that simple. You don't need to blame it on tariffs. The tariffs ate my
Well, it was the original Trump administration that did spend a lot of that money.
Sure, yeah, and 5 years
Yeah,
due.
they goofed up too.
Yeah, and 5 years is due now, right? Which is why the Bitcoin strategic reserve is important, because no one shows up. That's why who was there and who wasn't there. Again, foreign countries haven't commented, but you did have Paolo from Tether, one of the biggest buyers, talking about exactly that, decentralizing treasury bill auction buying. Normal people around the world participating in, what did he say? I don't know how many billions of dollars worth of treasury bill financing goes through Tether now. They're more than like Germany or something stupid like that. So that's a decentralized way of doing this. And again, you look at who was there, who wasn't there, who's commented, who hasn't commented. You can see a lot of the economic engine that Trump is assembling around the world just through who was at that meeting. And indeed, Russia picking up on these vibes, Russia understanding what's happening, not patriotic about its money, betting that there is something bigger at play, and it's got to make sure it's rich people who aren't patriotic about the ruble, right? They got dollars. They don't give a shit about the fucking ruble. You know what I mean? Go hang out with them in Dubai. They don't care about the ruble. They're not like, what does my ruble get me? That's not happening. Right?
I would maybe layer one more thing on top of that about what's happening in America, because I think you are very correct, Nolan. It's not just about, you know, who can set interest rates, like who controls the money, but like who spends that money. And I would add into the players of the dispute there, it's the White House, the executive, it's the Fed, and it's also Congress. And I think if you look at some of the things happening around the budget and federal spending, there is a shifting in who has the prerogatives to spend how they choose. And I think the implications for Bitcoin here can be profound, because it's like who will set policy around how this type of money will grow and evolve in an America where maybe some of the constraints that have been in place, I'd say going as far back as MT Gox, as those start to get withdrawn. And it's going to be very interesting to watch whether there will be casualties on one side or the other. It remains to be seen. But I suspect you believe that the Fed will be a casualty there, and I am kind of inclined to side with that one.
Well, we'll leave the drama for later. I want to flip it now to Block 887212 has everyone in Bitcoin talking. This is, of course, the latest block that was found by a Bitaxe device, a $200 open source unit of Bitcoin mining that can fit in the palm of your hand, but earn you $250,000 from the Bitcoin network. A sea change or upheaval going on in how we think about Bitcoin mining. You know, once a cycle, it seems we learned something new about Satoshi's invention. In 2021, it was this idea that Bitcoin could plug into the grid, monetize stranded energy. Now we have this idea that the people, can still mine, can still compete for Bitcoin block rewards, even despite the data centers out there the size of football fields that are hoovering up and competing for blocks. The Bitaxe, how is it leveling the playing field of miners, big and small? Nolan, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is some of the best news out there. I'm glad we prompted our audience last week to think about this, and we did bring up Bitaxe last week, just about the blue collar nature of Bitcoin's backing. And indeed, one of the worst problems in Bitcoin are these pools, the mining pools. It's consolidating. The 51% attack is almost there when you look at the way this stuff is aligned. It's not pretty. I don't like looking at it. To me, the greatest weakness in Bitcoin is centralization in mining. I think the miners themselves are happy about this. I think the miners themselves, if you go talk to the people running the big pools at Foundry, they're not happy about the amount of hash rate they've accumulated versus all the other pools. They don't like the look. It's not a good look for Bitcoin having centralized mining. And to see this story is everything we want in Bitcoin. We want normal people to have access to Bitcoin. We want this stuff to not seem so estranged, even from the mining level. The mining level we always loved that really organic idea of like a homesteader with a little heating mine that might win him a lottery ticket, right? Everyone who was attracted to Bitcoin in the early days saw that as a major building block for how the future could work.
I would note a key thing here for people who are maybe avid Blockworks readers more on the crypto side is that a lot of the early alternative cryptocurrencies come from trying to solve this very idea that Bitcoin mining scaling, or the economies of scale kind of forcing larger, better chips, bigger factories, was a problem to solve. Ethereum with its roots and moving from proof of work to proof of stake, Vitalik kind of coming out early on and saying, this is a problem, to solve with technology, ultimately trying to virtualize mining machines. But Litecoin as well, starting from this idea that we have to limit ASIC chip production. We don't want powerful miners, in these large data centers. We don't want these large data centers forming economic packs in pools. We don't want those pools consolidating against each other and doling out these rewards. Here we have a total flipping of the arrangement where it seems like you really do have a single miner, in this case we know, running 6 small machines in his house or her house, and being given the same reward that is being competed against by public companies like Mara and Riot and those types. It does feel like a decentralization moment. As a former miner, McSweeney, I'm curious for your thoughts. This must bring you back to the early days of trying to compete for those rewards.
Well, I mean, I was in the pools too. I mean, if you're a small miner, 99.999999999% of the time, you're not going to get anything unless you're in a pool. But it's kind of one of the more like romantic elements of Bitcoin, right? Like it's kind of like the phrase that was invoked earlier. It's kind of like that manifest destiny, Bitcoin exceptionalism. If you point your Bitcoin miner to the North Star, you might find something. And in this case, this miner did find something. It'd be amazing if this happened more often. But again, it's just the nature of the
second time in a few months, though.
It's happened at least, I think, like 5 or 6 times in the last few months, at least of what I've been tweeting out. But I guess like what I don't understand here is how is it actually possible? It's simply that the mining chip that makes up the Bitaxe is so advanced compared to all the other hardware, the average hardware, or that's not it at all. It's simply the randomness.
Sometimes again, I'm not going to say I'm an expert on their product, but just based on my knowledge,
there is no product or company
miners,
here, right?
I mean, miners are out there. They're flipping coins every day, and this particular source of mining hash rate, they flipped heads.
But don't you have to generate a certain amount? Because obviously you're looking to try to find the nonce within a hash, and it's the more you hash, the more likely you are to find the nonce in this case. But so it seems like this is just a pure act of luck. There's nothing greater. You can have an average chip in one of these little machines, and it doesn't matter. Is that correct?
I believe so. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Nolan, but it's just, the more hash rate you produce, you do have proportionally like a greater chance of
more lottery tickets.
You have more lottery tickets. And the reason that people pool together is so that they collectively have more lottery tickets. And so let's say a mining pool where independent miners can connect to, once they do find a block, then depending on how much work that they have generated between when they started and between the last block and the new block, they then receive that proportion of rewards to them. So back in the day when I would mine whatever shitcoin, I would get like a little bit of a percentage based on the hash rate I pointed at shitcoin A pool. But in this case, it's this person just sort of mining straight at it, and again, very very low probability that it works, but again, as we see every year a couple of times, it does work.
There's an incentive here now to not participate in pools, right? Like, so you have hash power joining the network, and they're actually you're better off economically, right? People saying, hey, I'll run this machine for 10-20 years, and if I never get anything, no bad luck, and if I get something, I win. But I really do think for the crypto general ecosystem, it really isn't said enough. Just how Bitcoin is an invention. It is something we are learning about, and we learn new qualities of the system. And so when you look at Bitcoin mining, us learning about, literally in 2021, I remember hearing for the first time as the market was this idea that Bitcoin, could monetize stranded energy, expand the grid. Here now we're learning that, decentralization is happening, even despite the fact that there's, two chip manufacturers making chips for new Bitcoin miners, and despite all this consolidation. So I do think it goes to the something I've been trying to say a lot on this podcast, which is Bitcoin is science, right? Like we're learning about something. Bitcoin is an experiment. That's how Satoshi and other developers have always tried to class it. And this is us just learning something new about the network, right? And that thing that we're learning is that proof of work is good. Proof of work has, even despite the centralization issues, there are ways around this. And I think that contrasts with what's happening in the crypto industry, where with things like staking, there isn't a way out of this, right? There's no way for you to be the lone staker, who just like randomly kind of wins, or we're certainly not hearing about it if it's the case, right? So this idea that economic consolidation, is a problem within blockchain networks, it seems like this is a real vote of confidence for proof of work, Nolan.
Yeah, I said at the minute Ethereum took the energy out of Ethereum, that they took the energy out of Ethereum. Like the energy is gone. Like there's nothing happening. And this coincides with its inability to keep its pace with Bitcoin price-wise. And you see the Bitcoin dominance index continue to just put Ethereum into the ground. You go talk to Ethereum people these days, and it's apocalypto. I mean, I talked to a bunch of these funds when I was out in Dubai that only do the Ethereum stuff. And these guys haven't felt all-time highs in 4 years or whatever it is, right? 2021 or something crazy. Exactly when they moved over to this proof of work system. Exactly when they took the energy out, right? It's about following the energy here. And energy is everything in our economy.
Well, it does feel like I've had some conversations like that too. It feels like their classic response is, "Oh, well, the governments are not smart enough. This is like the Bitcoin,
you got to be smarter.
Yeah, you're not.
You're not. Your Series 7 license on Wall Street wasn't enough. Your 130 IQ wasn't enough. Now you also have to be a computer science major and understand staking across various networks in order to participate in the system."
Well, I don't think this is the point, ill of these networks. I think the point is to illustrate that a lot of these alternative cryptocurrencies were founded on premises, right? Like they had this idea that there were certain problems with the Bitcoin, but because Bitcoin is science, you're not guaranteed that those problems will persist, right? So it is true that even the great late Hal Finney, thought that Bitcoin's energy consumption was the problem, because that was the mode of thought of the day. Now we've figured out that we can change the kind of power mix behind Bitcoin. We can use Bitcoin to actually work synergistically with green energy initiatives. That was a learning process that came from people investigating mining. The idea that you could move rigs out into the middle of an oil field or a stranded cow patch to produce that energy and build out that grid. We didn't know that was possible. And so I do think it's illustrative with alternative cryptocurrencies outside of Bitcoin. A lot of them are based on premises, and those premises aren't guaranteed to be true, right? Just because they have this idea that they're solving a problem that Bitcoin has. Bitcoin has shown time and time again that it will shift and change and redefine its own problems. I think this is an excellent example of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think you said it perfectly. It is, there's something organic about it. There's something that it's like backyard chicken coops or something, like you can set this up and you can go on with your life, right? And indeed, I've always been fascinated in the home mining for heating, right? The ones that just blow off a little heat, and then maybe you win a little Bitcoin in the way of subsidizing your heat bill. That was a very big idea early on. But I'll say, normally, just having been at the Satoshi Roundtable last month, one of the fellas who was representing the mining industry actually said, he brought up this Bitaxe example as, if this catches on, this really will create a shift in how miners think about it. We hear all about, is it going to be nation states versus just your corporate public miners? He says, no. Think about it the other way, not nation states versus public miners. You got to start thinking about public miners versus solo miners. And he brought up the Bitaxe example.
Well, certainly proof that Bitcoin can change and surprise. Final thoughts as we look at the week that was this turning point with the White House behind us. Maybe things that you're looking for the week ahead, Nolan, next week.
Well, I think, last week and then certainly with the Lummis summit, I think what we're seeing is sort of like the culmination of many, many months and years of narrative building. And sort of it all leads up to this big climax. Is it the climax, though? So from here, maybe it's not so much the next week, but really the months ahead of how does narrative become reality and action? And when that collides with the messy human incentives and dramas that just define what happens in Washington. And I think that it's always good to like set expectations realistically. Um, if these bills become law, if there are core challenges to some of these executive orders, I suspect that, we may see some of these things. And maybe the crypto industry, gets everything it wanted and more. Maybe there are some setbacks. Who knows? I mean, this is always an evolving process, but for those of us in the news business, it never gets old. So I'm excited.
Are you buying Bitcoin this week, McSweeney? Are you bullish? Are you getting in?
I mean, I don't invest in cryptocurrencies. I'm one of those with the old notion that if you are covering this stuff as a journalist, you should not hold it. So unfortunately, I will.
Well, you
not
can check
be
the
there.
blog for plug for the Blockwork disclosures page.
That's
Of
right.
course,
That's right.
leading
Which was the
industry and
subject
financial
of some discussion on Twitter. I have a lot of respect for those who choose this path. I have a lot of respect for those who don't. I think that's one of the beauties of crypto is that it's always been an open tent. I don't think that you need to hold these assets to be a part of the ecosystem. I think if that was true, I would have been run out of town on a rail many, many years ago. I certainly hope that people don't try to do that. But
Well, right
no,
now you have as much Bitcoin as the Russian Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. No
that's
one
true.
final.
I think I have slightly more than the Russian strategic.
Yeah, don't you guys have your summit next week? Isn't the digital asset
Digital
summit?
asset summit coming up. Yeah,
That's what I thought. Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see New York talking about all these things. I'm interested in that. I'll go back to what Michael Saylor said, and I'll read one of the quotes. He said, by embracing Bitcoin, America positions itself to dominate the 21st century financially. Traditional financial doctrines, much like old military strategies, may have once been valid, but are no longer applied today. The rules that define the past century are becoming obsolete, and the game has fundamentally changed. So I'll go back to what I'm looking forward to. We got the Federal Reserve coming out next week with its meeting about interest rates. We just saw Canada this week having to lower interest rates again, and the central bank straight up saying the tariff war will destroy Canada. Canada will not be able to survive this. And China, of course, opening a trade war against Canada as well. So Canada now having to fight a trade war against China and America. So I have a feeling it's not going to go well. And go back to what I said about these institutions and who wasn't invited and who wasn't there. The Federal Reserve wasn't there. I think you're going to hear the same thing from Jay Powell next week. And
I don't think that's how you pronounce Jay Powell's name now.
What did I say wrong?
We'll see you in New York. Digital Asset Summit coming to New York City next week, March 18th to the 20th. Still time to get tickets. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like and subscribe button. If you're following us on an X stream, feel free to give us a retweet, a like, a comment. We'll be coming at you with more Supply Shock. You can get it wherever podcasts are sold.